Hello and welcome to this episode of Office Hours, a little after the podcast special, where it's just Merle and I discussing topics related to the PhD and our lives. So, with that said, Merle, what are we talking about today?
Today we're actually talking about something quite funny, although albeit sometimes very, very much insidious. We're talking about the stereotypes that are present within academia. Sometimes, like I said, they're funny and sometimes they're really not. So let's dive into it.
Yeah. I mean, when I think of stereotypes, when I was growing up, close your eyes, think of an academic. Well, it was an older man with like a ratty ass jacket and elbow patches, glasses,
Yeah.
maybe more of like the Albert Einstein type, crazy hair, not very well groomed, a genius. Yeah, genius. I think that would be the
Okay.
stereotype. But I guess, yeah, it's more complicated than that, I guess.
Do you think they would be a nice person or not?
I think that they would be unapproachable,
Okay.
because they're like on a level above everyone else. They're operating on a frequency that no one else is operating on because of this genius.
Uh-huh.
And I guess that I never ever thought I would do a PhD. I never ever thought that I would go into academia. So I think that probably says a lot about the stereotypes that I held before I started my undergrad, was that, in economics, I didn't really have in my mind's eye a picture of someone that looked like me or someone that looked particularly any different from this Albert Einstein caricature in my head. Interesting. What about you, Matt? I know you've written a blog about this. So...
I have, and I really enjoyed writing the blog, although I had to dig a bit deeper than I initially thought. So my idea of an academic, before I wrote the blog, so when I was a bit younger, if you will, was actually quite similar. So yeah, older, male, white, not very fashionable. I mean, sure, clever to a certain extent, but maybe I would even argue that they, clever, but not really, I wouldn't say not approachable, just not very accommodating as a personality type.
yeah.
Very difficult to get a hold of, very difficult to get a grip on, very difficult to actually understand. So probably not a very good communicator, which is ironic because most academics do teach. So they have to be quite good at communicating, because otherwise, this is going to be quite a difficult lesson, very difficult course.
Well, it doesn't mean that they have to be good at communicating. I've had plenty of
Oh yeah,
lecturers that were definitely lacking in that core skill set.
yeah,
Sure.
no, absolutely. So there is just this idea, and if we're going to try to unpack this, and I do really think that we should look into all of these things that we've mentioned. So the one I really want to start off with is just the idea that the academic has to be male. Like, can we leave that in the 20th century? Like, I'm not fussed about carrying forward that stereotype. Because, like you said, like, there is no... So Sarah and I, we are both white, so we have that privilege, to put it quite bluntly. But we're also female. So for us, a male academic, if that is the only thing... And I have to admit, most of my teachers were male. Well, at least within the masters. So if the academics I came into touch with were predominantly male. And like Sarah said, there was no one like us around. And that is really demotivating because after a while, if every academic is male, obviously you're not gonna consider academia as a very serious career path because there's no one like you in it.
Yeah. And I think also as well, there's a sense, I felt a little bit that I had to leave my femininity at the door to be taken seriously. I guess, I'm always like a whirlwind of imposter syndrome, so maybe I'm feeling it so much more than everyone else in the room. But there was definitely a sense of, I'm not going to wear makeup or do my hair. I'm going to, I want people to, not look at me and see a woman, but see like a researcher.
Yeah, a very
rather than
serious
both.
person.
Yeah.
Not you don't want to be seen as emotional, hysterious, frivolous. No,
Yeah. So
hysterical, not hysterious, whatever.
but I mean, all it led to was my eyebrows just were not groomed, and it's just like, why do I? Why? I mean, this is something that people have talked about a lot. About you don't have to sacrifice. You shouldn't have to sacrifice part of yourself for the other part.
You shouldn't have to sacrifice, having two eyebrows instead of one for the sake of being taken seriously in academia. But this actually does come back to, the average academic not being very, like, groomed. Not like not in an unhygienic way. We're not accusing anyone of that. No, we're not. I personally can't remember someone who I thought was like, okay, you need like a bath. But I feel like there's plenty of people who I thought maybe you should have an eyebrow tweeze, maybe you should brush your hair, and you could do with some moisturizer, preferably a lot of moisturizer. But and maybe some beard oil.
Yeah,
actually, there was a lot of things I wanted to fix, but this is the thing. Is the clothing fashionable? No. Which is just unfortunate. But I feel like, and this is another thing. So Sarah already, stopped wearing makeup to be taken seriously. I amped it the fuck up. You don't even want to see my makeup collection. If Sarah wanted to be less feminine, I became hyper feminine. I wear makeup almost every day. I wear high heels. I wear short skirts. I wear tight fitting clothes that emphasize my very female shape. This is turning into a very different podcast all of a sudden.
Yeah, I'm like, what?
Yeah, sorry. Anyway, to paint you a picture via this auditory medium. So yeah, I really, but I'm also very loud and I'm very obnoxious and I'm actually quite arrogant. So, I do have these hyper masculine traits. So that works quite nicely.
It's a nice balance. Oh yeah. I mean, apart from most academics needing to be on an episode of Queer Eye.
Oh yes, queen.
I think there is a little bit of a sense that there's sort of one key mold of what an academic looks like, and I think that has lessened. And as I've actually entered academia and found more people within academia who don't necessarily fit this mold, I do think overwhelmingly academia is very, very white.
Yes.
Like extremely white. Like
it's like staring into the sun. It is white.
It's kind of very rare to hear from non-white voices or to be taught by non-white people. Like it's overwhelming. And I guess like this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone.
Oh no, because that's exactly what academics are. Academics are weird. They're predominantly Western. I mean, they're hyper educated, but that comes with the territory, so sorry. But they come from industrialized countries. They tend to be rich. I mean, the academic wage is not great for the amount of training that you've had, depending on where you are in the world. But we are predominantly from rich countries, and we're predominantly from democratic countries. So as soon as you are a person of color, falling within those categories is statistically less likely. And unsurprisingly, you're not the professor teaching any of us. And it's just, I'm getting quite tired of it, because I remember, starting out and being like, oh my God, everyone's male. I can't even imagine what this must be like if you show up and not just everyone is male, but everyone is white and you're female, or, for the sake of this argument, and you're female and you're not white. I can't even imagine how demotivating that must be.
Yeah. And if you think like the microaggressions that we've experienced from being women in the field, those must be completely amplified and just coming at you from all directions, if you don't have the privilege of also being white. I mean, we fit into this tribal picture a lot more than, I think we might like to think of ourselves. And also, there are so many amazing people, academics and activists and writers that speak on this topic, and much better than us.
Obviously.
I'll do my best to compile a list of people that I think you should really hear from about this in particular. But someone that I listened to recently is Angela Saini, And she's amazing. She's a writer, a reporter, but she's written a couple of books, and one of them is about race in science and white supremacy in science. And honestly, it's I mean, it shouldn't be shocking, but it is so shocking because we are, the same with colonialism in the UK education. We're not really taught about it. It's just sort of assumed that only white people, white men in the Enlightenment did science. Like, science didn't exist before white people did it.
Okay, great.
And she's incredibly interesting as a person. Like, she speaks so eloquently on this, so I would definitely recommend checking out her work and her stuff. When we're talking about stereotypes, I think in the current climate as well, with everything that's been going on, the death of George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter movement has been around
for a long time. Yeah,
for a
sure.
long time.
But it's important, and like academia is one of the sectors that prides itself on, lots of introspection, lots of knowledge, sharing, and being very open and inclusive. And it's not, and I'm sorry, it's just not. I'm sure the microaggressions are there. To be quite honest, I can't speak on them. I don't know if I'm just oblivious to them or I'm just too loud to notice the whispers. Could be either. No, it could be either. I genuinely can't think of a microaggression pointed at me, but then again, that doesn't mean they don't exist. I have no tale to tell, so I should probably just shut up about it. But the idea that, academia is very proud of itself, always has been. But the tower is ivory. The tower is white. And we know that. We are very aware of that. And I feel like, although I fully support the Black Lives Matter movement, obviously, but I feel like just thinking about the violence that is happening, somewhere else, because I think for the average European, it's kind of like, oh yeah, this is happening in the US. This happens here too. And I feel like we need to look much further than just violence and also see that this can take very, very other forms, such as the microaggressions that we've already mentioned, or the fact that, if you're a person of color, suddenly you're not in the top of academia, suddenly you're not a professor, suddenly you're not tenured, and you won't be teaching kids like Sarah and I were. I mean, I guess you could argue we're still kids, or you won't teach kids like we've taught them. Because I didn't have a professor of color in my master's. I didn't have a professor of color in my undergrad.
Yeah.
I barely had any females. I mean, I've had a couple. One of them, who taught me in my master's, is still a role model of mine. So this does make a massive impact. I found one person who shared a commonality with me. Well, she was white, but for me, predominantly, it was more important that she was female. Again, what is important for you? It can differ very, very much. What's important to you can differ very much. But as soon as I found someone who, was more similar than I was, she immediately became a role model of mine. I was really, really impressed with her. I really, really liked her. I also really like her work. So that was just great for me. And then I started to take the idea of going into academia a lot more serious. And it was very motivating. It really, really was.
Yeah. So, I mean, we know firsthand how important role models are. And, maybe that goes to explaining some of the leaky pipeline problem. I don't know if you must have heard of this terminology. Often it's used to explain why women don't stay in academia, but it can also be used to explain why people who aren't white don't stay. And the thing is, like, the cultures in the institution, within the institution, I've experienced the sort of toxic bullying cultures within academia firsthand. I have a lot of experience with that, and I unfortunately have seen a bit of the underside, the belly of the beast, a little bit of sort of, okay, well, what happens when actually someone is using their power to abuse someone below them and bully them? Well, actually, the response of the university is just so poor. What it comes down to is everyone's then running around to protect themselves and their own reputation. And it's incredibly disheartening to sort of, look under the hood of an institution that you really respect and you want to be a part of and see actually the engine inside is rotten.
I think it has to be. I mean, if you think about it, so if you think about it like purely objectively, what you have is a group of people who are predominantly like themselves. And within that, I mean, most of them, beyond being white and male, and this is not like a protest against the white male. You know, I'm not targeting anyone specifically. Like I enjoyed most of my professors, but let's not pretend this doesn't come with any problems. So most of these people are white, male, cisgender, and heterosexual. Now enter someone into that formula who doesn't qualify for any of those. So they might not be cisgender, they might not be hetero, they might not be male, or they might not be white. And it isn't very surprising. I mean, it's not great, but it isn't surprising that some of the dynamics suddenly start shifting. And if you only have one rotten apple in that entire bunch that singles the new person out on this one characteristic, which can be done sexually, it can be done from a race superiority perspective. It can be done from feeling like being a superior gender. So that's not necessarily sexually, but it can very often manifest sexually. It can come from the fact that they want to make you feel outcast because you don't fit a certain mold. In that case, I'm specifically thinking about being cisgendered or your sexual orientation. Like, people can make your life a living hell. And it is very easy to make someone's life a living hell if they are the odd one out. And that is toxic and it is disgusting, but it is unfortunately something that human nature constantly seems to do.
Yeah, I mean, these are all... how do I want to say this? I mean, within academia, the gatekeepers in academia have so much power, right? These are the journal editors who decide who gets published and when, right? These are the people at the heads of schools, or the people who get money for grants, right? There are so many gatekeepers within academia that can either foster talent or reject
destroy
you, right?
it.
They can either embrace you or just turn you away. And there's lots of rejection in academia. We already know this, but regardless of that, we know there are white supremacists, there are misogynists, there are people who have strong beliefs of superiority that are gatekeepers within the institution. And while we have these people as gatekeepers, how are we supposed to progress and become more inclusive and give opportunities to foster voices that are different from, this stereotypical academic? And I think it's something that we've heard a lot. I mean, we've had conversations on this podcast with some amazing people. I think actually, has everyone we've talked to been white?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we need to be doing a bit better on here, actually.
We're not the be-all, end-all of this conversation. We know for a fact that we're not really pointing fingers. We don't have anyone specific in mind. But we also know we need to do better. Like, we were already quite happy, that we had a gender-balanced... interviewee list. A pool of interviewees sample. I'm not entirely sure what you would call that, but like we know we've been lacking in other departments, and I think one of the reasons, although this is most definitely not an excuse, is the fact that I don't think we know many academics of color. We've never been exposed to them or to their work, and that is most definitely not an excuse. That is a symptom of a problem.
Yes, and I think it's also, white people right now, it's our job to educate ourselves as to what we can do to be allies and to help deconstruct the racist and toxic institutions that we are a part of and that we benefit from, right? Because we benefit from the system as being how it is, just being white. I mean, that's just a fact. Like, whether we want to admit that or not, a lot of people, I think, don't want to admit that because they think that means that none of the struggles that they've been through, or the hardships or the work that they put in, has been deserved. I mean, no one's saying that, but if you start the 100-meter race 50 meters in front of your opponent, right, it's no big surprise that actually, regardless of talent and genius and ability, you're going to finish first, right?
Yeah,
You're going to win.
It's not surprising.
So you can put all that effort into that 50 meters, but it
Yeah,
doesn't take
no,
away that
absolutely.
the other person has had to run 100.
No, but I think a reason why a lot of this change and this move towards inclusivity has been so slow is that there's a massive lack of perspective taking. So it isn't nice. Like I wouldn't like to be told by a person of color, despite it being very true. So if I had a woman of color telling me as a white woman that I'm privileged, and as such, it isn't surprising that I am possibly in this scenario, then to make it work, further ahead in the curve of, say, personal or professional achievements than her. What most people hear, and the first reaction you have to that is, but I did work hard. Don't take away my achievements. I did work hard. Like, I've worked for the place where I am. And you did, but the other person did as well. And
had to work harder.
And probably had to work harder to get to the same place, or even a lower place in terms of status, professional achievement, if you will, and is only being held back by their race and potentially gender. But that is not what people hear. The first thing that people feel is attacked. And as soon as you feel attacked, you are not going to cooperate. You are not going to become an ally. And so as a result, change isn't happening. Because people have profited by the system, because people are assholes, that is most definitely a reason, but also because they feel attacked. And I'm not saying as a person of color or as a woman, or as I feel this ought to say, like, as a minority, because I'm pretty sure like a bunch of the things we've mentioned aren't minorities, like not statistically speaking, but as a minority. This obviously is a problem. You're not, as a minority, you're not attacking people, you're just spelling it out. You've had privilege, as such you're further ahead, or it is not surprising that you are or could be further ahead. And this is just as much a problem in academia as it is anywhere else. But I'm not entirely sure if academia can pat itself on the back for being a more inclusive sector. I think it might be one of the worst.
Yeah, I just hearing how, that academia is very inclusive just makes my skin crawl, because
it's not. It's really
it's not
true.
No. And I mean, we are talking about academia. I mean, we are in UK institutions. You can argue that actually the institutions within academia that get the most publications and the most money are like American or European. Right?
Sure. I mean, I think America might be even more intense, but I mean, we've got no experience from American institutions, so like we're not really keen to talk about that, because we would never be able to give an actual representation of that. So, by the way, if you're an American listening, please do let us know what it's like at your institution, if you feel like it matches up, or if it's like what's going on at the UK institutions. I just want to know, does your institution look like a cheesecake, white and rich? I just need to know.
Yeah, I mean, it's to be honest, it's not surprising that, and going back to your point about people feeling attacked, white people feeling attacked, when they hear either another white person or a person of colour talk about their experiences and talk about the structural inequality and the racism that is within society and within the institution that we work in. It's not surprised that people feel attacked. I mean, and if that is your initial gut reaction, what you should be doing after that is thinking, okay, well, why do I feel so attacked?
Yeah.
Like, what is it about that's, and actually taking a deep breath and thinking about it and using it as an opportunity to challenge yourself and to learn, right? Because if you're feeling attacked, maybe it's because no one's ever said that to you before, or maybe it's your identity. You identify so strongly with the characteristics that people are saying are privileged, but you yourself don't feel privileged. I mean, that's not how privilege works, right? You don't have to feel your privilege, to know that you're privileged. It's actually, if someone is being discriminated against in the world, that must mean that there is privilege somewhere. It's the
Yeah.
privilege not to be discriminated against. It's the privilege not to have to think about your identity or how you are perceived by other people, whether it is your race, your gender, your ethnicity, your religion, right?
Yeah.
That is the privilege. You don't have to consider your identity when you go to work, because
It's
no
never been
one's
a
going to treat you
detriment.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one's going to treat you differently, or just subtly remind you that you are other, that you don't quite belong.
No, absolutely. No, I think you're absolutely right. And I feel like, especially if you're in any of the social or the behavioral sciences, not to split out different sectors of academia, but I mean, I have a reason for this. We know dual system reasoning. We know we've got a mind one or a system one, and we've got a second mind or a system two, the latter being more logical and being predominantly human. We know our first reaction is to feel indignant, to feel attacked, to feel threatened, maybe even, and to reject the initial statement of the fact that, some people do have privilege with certain characteristics and others don't, or to a lesser extent. But we also know this theory well enough to know that we need to give System 2 a chance to actually figure out what's going on. Like Sarah said, ask yourself why you feel attacked, figure out what's going on. And with, 2 minutes of System 2 thinking, I think you should be able to figure out that you're just not used to being called out on privilege, and that you're not being attacked, and there are statistics and facts that you can check, and that maybe your ignorant ass should get educated, and maybe it is time that you see the world for what it is, and that you acknowledge your privilege. A lack of acknowledgement of your privilege does not eradicate your privilege. That is not how it works.
Yeah, it's like if I close my eyes, the world is still here, right?
Yeah. Like, you might close your eyes and you might not be able to see us, but we can still see you. So,
yeah.
I'm not
and
sure
you look
this is how it
stupid.
works. And yeah, you look stupid as hell. No, I think this is a really, really important point. I think there's one more closing point before we close down this episode. I think one thing that Sarah has mentioned, and I think this is one thing that leads to a lot of bullying as well within academia, or at least it leads to very hostile interactions, is this idea of genius. So I'm sure there are a bunch of academics who are very, very smart. I'm sure they can put out work like no other. If you have a conversation with them, it might literally be 10 levels over your head. I've had plenty of these conversations. They don't make me feel particularly good about myself, but at least the academics that I've had them with, it always came from a kind place. Like, they just are really enthusiastic about their science, the work that they do. And they just sometimes need to remember that, I've got like 30 years less experience than they do. So, maybe sometimes it needs to be dumbed down. But there are people in academia who thrive, and it is disgusting, but this is true, who thrive on making you feel dumb. And if you present your work, and this is really not helpful to people who aren't keen or eager or very self-confident in their own work. So, for example, someone like Sarah, not to call you out, Sarah, but you've been very vocal about this.
Hey, yeah, it's true.
So there are people who genuinely get like a kick out of completely tearing someone down, to the extent where you're not entirely sure if it's still professional. It's probably not. And because it's completely unprofessional. And it almost gets really personal, and they hype up themselves and their own work and their own genius by tearing down others, and it is absolutely disgusting. And despite this person maybe being very, very clever, which I mean, good for them, their personality is just as rotten as the system that they function in. So if you,
I mean,
this is not predominantly the stereotype of an academic, I would argue, but they do exist. They do ruin it for everyone. And if you ever come into touch with such a person, just stay away. There is nothing to be gained from an interaction with this person. And their colleagues will try to avoid them as well, because no one likes to work with someone who is as sick and as toxic as they are. They might hold a high position that might be predominantly on the merit of their number of publications. Props to them. But there is nothing to be gained from being in their vicinity. If you find out that one of your supervisors is like this, just switch. There is nothing to be gained here.
And just on this, so this type of person that you are describing, so this is reviewer 2.
Yes, always reviewer 2.
Always reviewer 2. And this is also that one person in the seminar who keeps trying to argue with you instead of asking you questions or just letting you carry on with your presentation to sort of prove a point. And I often think that there are, I mean, this is my unprofessional opinion, but I often think there are 2 reasons for why a person may be acting out in this way. The first one is it's just insecurity. So these are the people they're the younger academics, right? They are just trying to establish themselves in the field, and they themselves probably feel quite insecure. And, you know, if they're able to put someone else down and try and make someone else look stupid, like going out of their way to make someone else feel stupid or look stupid, then they feel better about themselves, right? And I think that the insecurity one, that's something that can be grown out of, right? So I think this is something that I've heard before, that if you do your Viva, you shouldn't invite an external marker that is on the younger side, because they will be harsher to you in the Viva.
Interesting. Okay, fine. I'll ask someone who's at least 56.
Right. I mean, the other type of person that fits this mold is someone who just has a staggering superiority complex. So unfortunately, this is probably one that people don't grow out of, and actually as they get older they probably feel more superior, right? Because with age comes more complications.
I don't know. Do you know what the thing is? I have never met, and this is really intriguing, I have never met an predominantly male academic above the age of 50. I think that I didn't get along. Yeah, that I didn't get along with. They've always been.
I thought you just said I never met.
No, I have met. No, I've met plenty, okay. But I've never met. I mean, I haven't met many academics I don't really get along with. Anyway, but I think everyone I've met, but this is the thing, they're tenured, they're very secure in their job. I think they are literally there just for the love of science by this stage. They're always very supportive, they can easily make time for you, they love to discuss science, it doesn't have to actually go anywhere. Maybe that's just the Warwick group. I mean, our behavioral science group is actually quite peculiar, I think. But they've all been perfectly lovely. But this is the thing, like they have a very secure environment built around them, so that is quite different. Whereas, you know, as Sarah said, with younger academics, maybe they're not properly tenured yet, they can get quite vicious, which is actually a stereotype that comes from economics. So if you want to find a vicious bunch of academics, just study economics, mate.
Yeah, I can attest to that.
Yeah,
there have been some characters. But yeah, it's the age-old thing of, you know, if you felt bullied or you've been hazed, you want to also participate in the hazing culture when it's your turn, right?
Absolutely,
it's this weird tribal...
Pathetic?
Well, yes, pathetic, but it's sort of like, this happened to me, so the next person can't get off scot-free, right? It was hard for me, so it has to be hard for you.
No. That's toxic reasoning, and you can stop that right now. I'm not keen.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we should wrap it up before we get into a debate about hazing culture. Thanks a lot for listening. If you are a person of privilege, or if you are a person of lesser privilege, do let us know, because I don't know how else to put it, but you know what I mean. Do let us know on the social media what you thought of this episode, what your experiences are, if you've had any negative experience within academia, or if you had sometimes a very surprising, a positive experience within academia. They happen as well, you know. We should also look at also look at the good things. Sure. Sometimes a rotten machine can publish good results, you know, it happens. So yeah, I hope this was entertaining, educational, or at least thought-provoking. We hope to see you for the episode next week, and we hope you have a great week.